started playing guitar pretty early on, actually. Maybe when I was about 10 or 11, I started playing the guitar. We found a guitar. Found a guitar in the house that my father bought, actually. And I found something else in there that has kind of mystical overtones. There was the people who had lived in the house previous to that time, they had left some of their furniture. And among the furniture was a great big mahogany radio. It's like a jukebox. And it had a 78 turntable when you opened up the top. And I opened it up one day, and there was a record on a country record. I think it was, it was a song called Drifting Too Far From Shore, but I think it was the Stanley Brothers, if not Bill Monroe. I played the record, and just brought me into a different world. When I began listening to the radio, I began to get bored of being there. But up until I heard stuff coming over the radio, I don't remember really being bored. I don't know, I remember the name of the station that came out of Mexico. It was some station that came out of Mexico, and then there was one that came out of someplace in Louisiana. I don't remember the call letters. But those stations would come on, towards the later part of the evening, and the early part of the evening would be the radio shows, like Fibber McGee and Molly and Inner Sanctum and FBI and those kind of things. I don't remember being entranced by anything on the radio, really, except maybe when Grand Ole Opry came on. Okay, so what was the entertainment around town? Well, I'll tell you who the heroes were. Gorgeous George the Wrestler, he'd come through, maybe 3-4 times a year with his troupe. There'd be boxing shows. The Flanagan brothers were top draws. We always watched them. Bobo Olson, the middleweight champ, came through. And then there were country western shows, which always had somebody like, Slim Whitman or Hank Snow, a lot of those guys. Ferlin Husky, he'd be in them, and a lot of spangled suits. And then the Carney shows would come through, and there'd be the stock car races, and then bands playing in the park in the summertime, and like small big bands kind of music, pop music from the 40s and 50s. Dance bands playing stuff like Begin the Begin, and then I started listening to the radio and hearing songs which were which were different, like Mule Train and Ghost Riders in the Sky, like songs like kind of in a minor key. And when rock and roll came in, it seemed to be kind of like an extension of all that, and that was accessible to me. So I kind of jumped on that wagon and rolled on down the road. Well, at that time, my favorite rock and roll performer was the inimitable Little Richard, and I played of all of his songs. They were easy enough to play, and I could scream them out. Eddie Cochran songs, Gene Vincent stuff. We played just about all those songs that we'd heard that come across on the pop radio stations. But then I was also listening to the more deeper stations that came across late in the evening. There were circuses. The circuses came through. There were tent shows at Kearney Midways. There was an awful lot of stock car races, like the old cars with the country stock car races. Those were popular. I think it was the last days of Kearney shows. You'd see anything from the Snake Woman to the Pygmies to the the Fat Man and the Snake Woman and all that, and some pretty risque shows. Risque would be hardcore burlesque. You could see that, and guys in blackface. You saw that too. George Washington in blackface, and or Napoleon wearing blackface. There's like weird Shakespearean things. People playing stuff that didn't really make any sense at the time. But actually, it did. I probably retained a lot of it because when I started writing songs, I started subliminally writing a lot of songs, which I probably wouldn't have attempted to even think about unless I had some concept of that type of reality, of mixing genres and ages and different historical figures from the past. As far as being bad, it was so cold. There was law and order prevailed, but there was very little law and order. I think our town had maybe 3 policemen. Bad people you couldn't be bad. It was you were dead. You quick if you. It was just a tough place. I did get to see Woody. I went to see him. I got the impression I was about one of the few people, if not the only person that came to visit him. I visited him at the Morristown hospital. Basically, I think it was an insane asylum. Maybe he was misdiagnosed at that time. I don't know. But he was in control of his mind. I mean, it was obvious to me that he was in control of his mind. He asked me to bring him things, and I don't know, I was young and impressionable, and I think I must have been shocked in some kind of way to find him where I found him. I heard Leadbelly singing some, Becky Deem, or Walk from East St. Louis, it's only one thin dime. I said, ooh, I want to sing that. I don't want to sing Hound Dog or whatever. I wanted to sing, I wanted to sing like Blind Lemon song, like, she's got eyes like diamonds, hair like an Indian squaw. I said, ooh, that's what I want to sing. I want to sing that. I don't want to listen to popular radio anymore. I thought folk music was, delivering me something, which was the way I always felt about life, and people, and institutions, and ideology, and it was just, uncovering it all, and finding it all there. Lonnie was played at Folk City, and I thought he was just great. He could play rings around anybody, and sang fantastic. One night he showed me something on the guitar that didn't make any sense to me at the time, but it was a style of playing that was mathematically different than any other kind of way to play. And this was just one of the ways that he knew how to play. He could play very intricately also, but he showed me this mathematical formula that worked anywhere on the scale. It didn't mean anything to me at the time, and I never got to develop it until many, many years later. That's about the only thing anybody ever taught me that was profound on the guitar, which I've been able to use, in my songs. You would have to make an impression on somebody, which that's what I picked that up from Van Rock, actually. There was many, many singers who were good, but they couldn't focus their attention on anybody. So they couldn't really get inside somebody's head. And so that person would be ambivalent towards them, and not really care if they passed them by. But I learned kind of early on, you gotta be able to pin somebody down, and then whereas they, like they couldn't get away so easy. You know what I mean? You have to make yourself memorable in some kind of way. Cafe Wa, place open about noon, and it would be a non-stop entertainers, if you want to call them that, from noon until 8. Everyone played, I think, 20 minutes. Well, I played with Freddie Neal, a guy who later wrote Everyone Is Talking. Everyone Is Talking. He was a big star down there. He played mostly chain gang songs and popular blues-based ballads and maybe some calypso-type folk songs. And he was the ringmaster besides. So I played in his band all day. Played the harmonica for him, and I fit in, and I didn't really learn much. I did that until about 8, and they got fed, and he would give me what he could, and the place was usually packed from 12 to 8 with just sailors or tourists and lunch hour secretaries and people like that, And then at 8, all the rest of that houses would open, like where you pass the basket and play. Well, you had to be somewhat good to even play at those places. They had auditions, but they didn't pay you anything, and you made what you could. But the place that did pay was the Gaslight. That was a tough place to get into for someone without a reputation. And the guy down there that was the star of the street, who he was at the time actually, was Dave Van Ronk. And I heard his records when I was in Twin Cities. I'd heard some compilations records that he was on. And I thought he was really great. Folklore Center was where all the folk music in the world was happening. It was all going on there. Records and books and there weren't any tapes then, but it was instruments, dulcimers and banjos and all just, auto harps and harmonica racks. I mean, I'd never seen a harmonica rack before, a real one. I was making them out of a coat hanger. And records, of course. And so it was a place to stay warm, in the winter, and just listen to records, learn stuff, and meet all the folk singers that were coming in and out of town. Oh, all these people were monumental performers. John Jacob Niles was just incredible. He was like, he sounded like an old woman, but like an old, scary woman out of a Shakespeare play, with a high, piercing, eerie, wailing voice, and he had white hair, long white hair, and he played a strange instrument that I don't think anybody had ever seen, something that maybe only came over from the old country, and they didn't have many of them. That's where I got the song, It Ain't Me, Babe, from listening to him play. He used to sing a song called Go Away From My Window. He used to play a bunch of eerie, spooky ballads, and I only saw him a few times, but he was highly impressive, left a lasting memory. Van Ronk himself was a colossal performer. I mean, he was, he drove people crazy, really. I always make an attempt to see the Ramblers, North City Ramblers. They play like at schoolhouses and churches. They never played on the scene. They were never on the scene. But I always made attempts to see them. And I'd see the gospel shows. I'd go see, Sister Rosetta Tharpe and Dixie Hummingbirds and Swan Silvertones. I'd see all of them play. Well, Sister Rosetta Tharpe was, I heard a lot of Blind Willie Johnson at Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and I thought if she wasn't singing gospel singing, she'd be a blues singer. She was singing gospel blues, and she played electric hollow body guitar. I just loved the way she sounded, and with a driving rhythm. But I'd never really seen who I'd wanted to see. I would have wanted to see Blind Willie Johnson a lot, like the Holy Ghost is a Mystery, that kind of thing. I thought he was the deepest singer, but I'd only heard him on records. Well, the Robert Johnson record at that time was astounding. I played it for Van Ronk, And Van Ronk was like, "Who is this guy?" Like, well, no one's ever heard of him before. That was an astounding record, of which I picked up a few things here and there and used along the way. Well, getting back to the Robert Johnson record, what was astounding on the record was just the sheer songwriting, which I hadn't heard that before. I hadn't heard blues songs like just 12 bar songs, which could be each one identifiable in its own genre, and so many different rhythms that he'd set up just with his one guitar. That I was pretty overwhelmed, actually. But no, I never listened to the records I made. Once we completed the record and it was released, I didn't have any real reason to listen to them again, and I never did. I never really thought they were really perfect records in any kind of way. They weren't the records that were well produced So you can say what you will about pop music. All the pop music records were extremely well produced, and my records weren't well produced. They were a lot of the sound on them was disordered, and I always wanted to make the song come through in the best way possible. That's all I was concerned really with. So therefore, the performances really weren't the ideal performances on any of the records that I made. John Hammond, yeah, he was John Hammond. He was a kind of like a Damon Ryan character. Is that the word? One of these old Broadway guys. Buzz cut haircut. He had a buzz cut, conservative dressing, little narrow tie. Well schooled in all the music that we all loved. Before I left that day, he gave me some records, which he gave me the Robert Johnson record at that time, which Columbia was putting out, and no one had ever heard any Robert Johnson songs because they weren't on any of the. Maybe they were on a few reissue things here and there, but they had them all in the vault, and they issued that record called King of the Delta Blues, and he gave me one of the first copies of it. So that was early 1961 probably, yeah. And he gave me Bessie Smith records and Charlie Christian and a lot of stuff that he thought would interest me, and then he told me come back with with this at a certain time to record. When it came to me, the producer really didn't do that much. No one did. Hammond didn't. The one that followed him didn't. The one after that didn't. After a certain period of time, a producer, whoever they were, they had assumed that I was going to bring in a preconceived song, which meant they didn't have to do that. Usually a producer in charge of the session is in charge of everything, including the song. Well, if an artist is writing his own song, he doesn't have to do that. So, what does a producer do? I don't know, beats me. On my records, it was more important to have a good engineer, I would think. I wrote a lot of songs in a quick amount of time, I could do that then. Because the process was new to me. I felt like I'd discovered something no one else had ever discovered, and I was in a certain arena artistically that no one else had ever been in before, ever. And although I might have been wrong about that, considering maybe some of the old troubadours, which were in the days before recording, but I thought that I needed to press on, and get as far into it as I could. Yeah, Subterranean Homesick Blues. I don't think I would have wanted to do it all by myself. So I thought I'd get more power out of it, with a small group in back of me. Well, there wasn't any negative response to people who hadn't heard it before. I didn't understand what the gripe was all about. I'm a musician first, and a critic. I can't self-analyze my own work, so and I wasn't going to cater to a crowd because I knew certain people would like it and certain people didn't like it. there's many of us who could have probably done, gone into this field or that field because of guaranteed success one way or another. But I never was interested in that, and I don't know where the negative response. I mean, a negative response to me would be somebody stops coming to see you play, or they flat out don't want to, deal with your recording in some kind of way. A negative response had nothing to do with me. I mean, I'd read that Stravinsky had negative responses, Coltrane, many negative responses. Charlie Parker himself had, lots of negative responses. People are always, emotionally charged up when some artist they feel, is not doing what they used to do, in a previous time. The British audiences were the first audiences that really accepted what I was doing at face value, and to them, to that crowd, it wasn't different at all. It was right in line with all their traditional everything that they'd been read about in school. I mean, the Shakespearean tradition or the Byron and Shelley, and that was the first audiences. The first audiences that I encountered that accepted what I was doing at face value were the British audiences. Yeah, okay. So Mary Martin is this woman. She worked at Grossman office, and I had many shows coming up, and it was obvious that I needed a band to play them because I had songs that were being represented. They represented themselves as a singer with a band, so I needed a band. Putting a band together can be tedious, and I was hoping that there was some existing band that was out there that I could just use, and Butterfield was doing all his thing, so who I really wanted was Al Cooper, that I thought was perfectly complimentary keyboard guy, and then he had a bass player named Harvey. And then there were a bunch of other people around, but Mary said that she knew of a band out of Canada, a bunch of Canadians that were working out in New Jersey. And it used to, in the past, sometime I'd played with Ronnie Hawkins, who had made some records for Roulette, and I knew who Ronnie Hawkins was. And she said this band had been with them a long time, and they knew this kind of music, and I should use them. And so she knew them personally, and the couple of them came up to New York from there. I don't remember who came. Maybe it was I can't remember exactly who came, but just a few of them did. And we talked a while. And, I said I needed a band, but I wasn't looking for. I just was looking for a couple of guys. That was because I wanted to put them with Cooper and the other guy, the bass player. And but I ended up taking the guitar player and the drummer out of later they became a group known as the Band, but at that time I think they were called Ronnie Hawkins or the Hawks or something like that. Yeah, I think that was what they were called, and they were working just clubs, rhythm and blues clubs, and that's all the kind of music they were playing was cover tunes, like with Bobby Blue Bland and Junior Parker songs, and they did it quite well, but that wasn't what was happening at the time. Well, Mike Bluefield, I always thought he should have stayed with me, instead of going with Butterfield, but that was his point, that was his life to lead, I first heard him when Grossman Grossman had me come out to play at a club they had started in Chicago, and the name of the club was The Bear. He just came in and introduced himself and told me who he was, and he said he'd heard my first record, and he said he wanted to show me how the blues were played, and listen to this and listen to that, and I didn't feel much competitive. I didn't feel much competitive with him. I mean, he could outplay anybody, even at that point, Well, when it was time to bring in a guitar player, play on my record, I couldn't think of anybody but him. I mean, he just was the best guitar player I ever heard on any level, and he could flat pick and he could finger pick, and it looked like he'd been just born to play guitar, you know. And he came into the session, you know, carrying his guitar once more in his paper bag. Well, not really. I mean, I was famous. I mean, you can be famous on the street where you live, and that's one type of fame. You can be famous in your town. Another kind of fame. You can be famous in the county, you know, or you can be famous and known only to a few people, you know, who are, you know, in a similar field. That's not anything out of the ordinary. I mean, certain doctors are famous to other doctors, or certain lawyers are famous to other lawyers, but common man wouldn't really know who they were. And the kind of fame that musicians seem to get is the kind of fame where everybody, whether they want to know who you are or not, is your whole you know, personal condition is just forced on them, and that becomes tricky then when people who don't know you really what you're really about suddenly know, you know, who you are.